Hi, my name is Lydia Coltai, and I'm a member of North Carolina's Climate Action Corps. And this year I'm serving with Riverlink and Conserving Carolina. Today I'm going to talk to you about climate resilience and climate justice. And this is just a brief introduction to these topics. But if you're interested, please reach out and I can help you find more resources to dig deeper. We're going to begin today by explaining what we mean when we say climate change. The Earth's climate has been changing for millennia through completely natural processes. But when we say climate change, we're referring to human caused changes in predictable climatic conditions that have been relatively stable for the past 10,000 years. And that stability has allowed civilization to arise and agriculture to flourish. Along with those changes are an increasing variability and volatility of the Earth's climate. And that's due to the addition of relatively small amounts of CO2, methane, and other greenhouse gases to Earth's atmosphere. And these gases are measured in parts per million, but they're so powerful that even a small amount has a big impact on Earth's climate. The main causes of human caused climate change are burning fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas, deforestation and land use changes, and an increase in animal agriculture. And if you'd like to explore more, I encourage you to check out NOAA's Climate Literacy webpage. This is a chart which is probably familiar to most people. It's often called the hockey stick graph, and it was first developed in 1999 by Michael Mann, Raymond Bradley, and Malcolm Hughes. And it shows how many degrees Celsius we are currently above pre-industrial global surface temperatures. And just with a quick glance at this chart, you can see that where we were in 2016, and this chart has been updated with more recent data from since 1999. But you can see that we're far above what would be considered a normal variability of Earth's climate. And so, why do we care about climate change? Well, the main reason we care about climate change is because of its impacts. And we are seeing very strong impacts of climate change today. And we know that those impacts will increase over time. Some of the impacts we're already seeing are an increase in frequency, intensity, and variability of extreme weather events. We're also seeing a growing risk of floods, landslides, wildfires, and drought, as well as more intense urban heat island effect due to rising temperatures. We've also seen a reduction in precipitation, and in particular snow, which leads to a reduction in freshwater reserves. Another impact is more frequent crop failures, which is resulting from unpredictable weather patterns. And all of these impacts contribute to rising social instability caused by the growing inability to meet basic needs. So, with all these impacts, we're really in need of developing climate resilience. And what do we mean by climate resilience? It's really exactly what it says. It's about developing resilience to climate change. We know climate change is already causing massive disruptions, and these disruptions will likely continue for centuries. As NASA has said, CO2 remains in the atmosphere for 300 to 1,000 years after it is emitted. So we know that the emissions that we put into the atmosphere today will be with us for the long term. Climate resilience is about designing and implementing strategies that can protect us from climate disruption and create a future in which all life can thrive. And both adaptation and mitigation strategies play an important role in developing climate resilience. Adaptation strategies are focused on helping us adapt to the changing climatic conditions we find ourselves in, whereas mitigation strategies focus on helping us reduce our emissions so we don't continue to cause the problem that got us here in the first place. And so climate resilience can encompass many different kinds of strategies. And here I've broken it down into some ecological and human focused strategies. But one thing to remember is that climate change is really teaching us that there is no separation between ecological and human. Humans are embedded in ecological systems, and our health is dependent upon the health of the systems in which we're embedded. But just for simplicity's sake, I did divide it into some ecological strategies and more human focused strategies for developing climate resilience. Some of the resilience strategies for ecological community include creating habitat and sanctuary spaces for threatened species. That can look like planting a pollinator garden or planting native plants in a rain garden. An additional strategy is maintaining riparian buffers to reduce the impacts of flooding, erosion, and pollution in the face of stronger storms. And that is a strategy, as well as the first one I mentioned, that Riverlink is already implementing in communities. With our rain gardens and our stormwater projects and green infrastructure projects, we are doing a lot of this work for the ecological community. Some of the resilience strategies for human community include creating emergency evacuation plans for climate disruptions, as well as making sure people's basic needs are met to reduce vulnerabilities to climate change. An additional strategy, and one that Riverlink has employed, includes installing green infrastructure to handle increased quantities of stormwater. And so here on the right side of the slide, I've included photos of a rain garden that Riverlink installed, as well as a stormwater wetland project that was installed by Riverlink. And that was to help manage increasing quantities of stormwater runoff. I want to share a quote from the Kresge Foundation's publication, Bounce Forward: Urban Resilience in the Era of Climate Change. And they say, we define urban resilience as the capacity of a community to anticipate, plan for, and mitigate the dangers and seize the opportunities associated with environmental and social change. Not all communities are being impacted by climate change in the same ways or to the same degree, however, which is why we need climate justice. Climate justice is a framework for understanding who is most impacted by climate change and why. Climate justice means our solutions must take into account who is most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And that includes the disabled, elderly, children, women, people living in poverty, people of color, and people experiencing systemic oppression. A climate justice lens informs how we prioritize action to support vulnerable communities. It requires listening to those most impacted first and working to meet community identified needs that create greater climate resilience. Why do we need climate justice? The reason we need climate justice is because those most impacted by climate change are generally people who have done the least to cause the problem and have the fewest resources to recover from climate impacts. Climate justice is essential to address the inherent injustice of climate disruption. And climate justice can be applied to any scale, from local to national to global. Local climate justice issues highlight the need to center marginalized, low wealth, and BIPOC communities that have been historically divested in. Global climate justice issues highlight the need for high emitting nations and former colonial powers to fund a just transition for low emitting colonized nations. And finally, I would like to conclude by saying Riverlink is showing up for climate resilience and climate justice. We're doing that by prioritizing equity in our work to protect and restore our waterways, listening to the most impacted communities, and integrating community needs into our restoration projects. And we are committed to reducing the burden of climate impacts on marginalized communities and doing our part to ensure all our neighbors have an opportunity to thrive. And in conclusion, I would just like to thank you all for joining us in this work and supporting us, and for being here today to listen to this talk. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.